less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/premium to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Premium.
What is our time on earth for? Blessed are we in lands of rich greenery, full of life and opportunity, where our responsibility is to make time. The time to lead the way for prosperity. The time to lead the way for society. The time to lead the way for Mother Earth. We make the time to do the right thing for a future that's fully inclusive and to leave no one behind. To share the prosperity for greater unity in our diversity. To elevate society by bridging the financial divide with easy access to financial facilities for all. Make time to innovate for humanity. Our solutions and initiatives are investments in a future sustainable for each and every one of us. Everything that we do and stand for is for humanity. For when we humanize how we do business, we're continuously making time for good a reality.
SM Investments is one of the largest Philippine conglomerates. We've been around for over 60 years. We have 3 core businesses, mainly retailing, banking, and properties. Over the past 60+ years, sustainability is something which SM has had as a culture. It's something which we as a group has been practicing from the very beginning. We take into account the entire impact on the environment, including, let's say, providing sustainable energy, renewable solar powers, water treatment facilities, and waste recycling. We also provide, like for example, for our malls, we make the malls more like a community center, which also then becomes like an area for relief effort if ever there's any sort of calamity that occurs. We also provide support in terms of education and training and healthcare, because at the end of the day, it's the sustainability of the community that continues to provide the growth for our businesses. Biodiversity is very important in everything that we do as a country and as individuals. For example, in our Hamilo Coast development, we work very closely with the WWF in terms of reforestation and also culturing more mangroves in the area.
There is this climate change that's looming over our Mother Earth. If we can contribute no matter how little, and if I can get everybody to be aware of it, I think we will make an impact. It's never too late.
Sustainability is very important because for a business to be able to continue to grow and last for many, many years, it's very important that the business support the community in a sustainable way. Because in the end, it's also the community and the environment that sustains the high growth of our businesses.
Good day. Thank you for joining us on the Manila Times Online Business Forum, where we discuss corporate sustainability in the country and how it impacts the common folk and the communities where businesses operate. My name is Defort Villasaran, the Manila Times or TMT editor. I am also your co-moderator for today. Co-moderating with me is Conrad Carino, the Manila Times or TMT business editor. Hi, Conrad.
Yeah, good morning, Defort. Yeah, good morning.
So I see you're well dressed for the occasion today. It's glad to be working with you again. What's the business buzz on corporate sustainability across the archipelago?
Yeah, what I have observed is that there is an increasing awareness among big companies to reduce their carbon footprint and contribute to the overall greening efforts of the country. One good example here is our establishments, including major mall operators like SM, utilizing solar power to reduce their dependence on fossil-based fuels. And many companies have included in their reforestation and recycling programs in their corporate social responsibility programs. And that's really a good development.
Yes, well, that's the impact of implementation on the ground and in the real world setting. But meanwhile, we have these textbook principles that were taught about how corporate sustainability actually helps businesses improve brand image, reduce overhead costs, and make their shareholders happier and increase productivity. Now, maybe we can discuss this with in terms of as the subtopics in our forum today.
Yes, that's right, Defort. That's why our forum for today is titled Environmental Practices for Sustainable Businesses. And with us today to help reconcile the theory with practice are two social scientists. The first is Glenn Banaguas, the president of the Environmental and Climate Change Research Institute.
Good morning, Mr. Banaguas. May we call you Glenn?
Yeah, hi, good morning. Yes, please call me Glenn.
Okay, thank you for joining us, Glenn. And joining us is my dear friend and fellow columnist in the business section, Dr. Ludwig Federigan, the executive director of the Young Environmental Forum.
Thanks for joining us too. It's great to be working with you again on communicating the sustainability initiatives for businesses. Would you prefer to be called Ludwig or Wiggy?
I prefer to be called Ludwig kasi Wiggy sounds very young and I am no longer young. Ito ko, wala nang buo.
Young at heart, maybe, yes. Well, thank you, Ludwig, for taking time out from your schedule to give us a talk right after Glenn gives his. Now, we're honored and grateful to have both of you as our guest speakers on the Manila Times Online Business Forum titled Environmental Practices for Sustainable Businesses, like Conrad mentioned. But before we get into both of your presentations, Ludwig and Glenn, Conrad has some important announcements, right, Conrad?
Yes, first of all, our business forum would not have been possible without the help of our special partners, SM and Maybank. So thank you, SM and Maybank. And secondly, we would like to acknowledge our loyal organization partners. They are the British Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, the Cebu Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the French Chamber of Commerce and Industry in the Philippines, the Davao City Chamber of Commerce and Industry, or DCCCII, the Financial Executives Institute of the Philippines, or FINEX, the Italian Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, Inc., or ICCPI, the Management Association of the Philippines, or MAP, the Nordic Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, the Philippine Center for Islam and Democracy, and She Talks Peace. And of course, our media partner is the Manila Times TV.
Indeed. The Manila Times thanks our special partners and organization partners. Now, let's take a deep dive into environmental practices for sustainable businesses, beginning with our first keynote speaker. Now, aside from being an educator, our first speaker has the unique distinction of being a diplomat scientist at the same time. Being one of our leading experts on the environment and climate change and even disaster risk, he applies data analytics to push science-based policy solutions. Now, for all of his work, he has been the sole Filipino to receive the prestigious United Nations Sasakawa Laureate for Disaster Risk Reduction, among other numerous and notable international and local awards. Now, in terms of what he has been able to garner. Now, it comes as no surprise that he has been also the first Filipino to be the U.S. mission to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations and by the U.S. Department of State for Science and Technology of the field of climate change and sustainable energy. Now, he is the advisor of various national government agencies in the Philippines on these matters. At the Foreign Service Institute of the Department of Foreign Affairs, for instance, he handles environmental diplomacy, climate diplomacy, disaster diplomacy, and science diplomacy. He is Glenn Banagua's Environmental and Climate Change Research Institute President. Glenn, the screen is yours. Hello, Glenn.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
All
Loud and
right.
clear.
All right. Thank you so much for thank you so much for the invitation. Okay. I would like to thank Klink, Dante Ang, and of course Blanca for the invitation. Okay, let me provide you a very specific title for this particular presentation. And what I would like to present to you is the program that I developed 10 years ago, the program that really won the hearts of the United Nations. Okay. I call this particular program the Climate Smart Philippines Science for Service. Okay, this particular program covers 81 provinces, 146 cities, 1,488 municipalities, and 42,046 barangays. So whenever we talk about climate smart, we refer to two particular solutions. We are after for the climate change mitigation, and the other one is climate change action. A trip to resilience and sustainability, wherein I'm going to provide you what TRIP is all about. Okay, under climate change adaptation, a trip resilience and sustainability, we follow a certain framework. And I call this framework Track Risk Impact Policy Framework, where T stands for track assessment, R stands for risk assessment, I stands for impact assessment, and P stands for policy, where programs and projects that are going to be developed, implemented in a certain province, city, or municipality. Okay, let's move on to the track assessment. Under this particular assessment, this is what we always consider every time there is a disaster that happens, brought by different climate hazards such as tropical cyclones, your flooding, your drought, your sea level rise. So it's not just one particular solution. It has to be addressed by different types of assessment in order to address and tackle these different enigmatic conditions. So under the track assessment, we consider the human resources and demographics, the people who are living in the province, the people who are living in the city, and people who are living in the municipality. We also want to include the historical analysis. What happened there before? What is happening right now? So it's just a matter of comparing what really happened in a certain province and what is happening right now. And it's really very important for a scientist or for an analyst to understand the scenarios. Number 3 is about scenarios, trends, and projections. Now, why do we need to include climate scenarios and projections in the analysis? For instance, for example, one particular province experiencing rainfall, all right, erratic rainfall. And then what about its temperature? And the climate scenarios and projections, it is very important for all of us to understand if one particular province is going to experience an increasing amount of rainfall, increasing amount of temperature, and this has to be included in the planning. And that's the reason why the climate scenarios and projections have to be integrated in their planning and decision making. Now, under the climate scenarios and projections, we usually consider given global climate models that are accredited, that are being used in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, or IPCC. So we don't use global climate models that are not actually accredited, that are not actually recognized by the UN IPCC, and that's the purpose why this is integrated in the track assessment. Now, another assessment is also important. So you don't just determine the track, you don't just determine the rainfall and temperature for the next 30 years, because it is also important to conduct comprehensive risk assessment. And this is very, very much this is known And in this particular framework, wherein risk is assessed as a function of hazard, exposure, vulnerability. So we use the international framework of the UNDRR. It used to be the UN United Nations International Strategy for Disaster Risk Reduction, but now it's the UNDRR, or the UN Office of Disaster Risk Reduction. So you have your hazard, you have your exposure, and you also have your vulnerability. Hazard, climate hazard, because this is about climate smart Philippines, we consider different types of hazards. Like what I mentioned a while ago, your tropical cyclones, your flooding, your sea level rise, your drought. So these are the climate hazards that we consider. Now, in terms of exposure, if the exposure is in terms of population, may it be individual or household, there is a corresponding vulnerability parameter that we use. So if the exposure is individual or household, the vulnerability that you can use is either your high poverty incidence, the poverty incidence, and the other one is your HDI, or the Human Development Index, wherein age, exposure, and income are included. So what do we mean by that? How vulnerable are you? For instance, why HDI? Why age? We really want to know if who is really more vulnerable, the people who are young or the people who are old. And in terms of education, who are again more vulnerable? The people who have education, or the people who don't have any education at all. And in terms of income, who are again more vulnerable? The people who are rich or the people who are poor. Now, that particular vulnerability parameter, the HDI or the poverty instance, can only be used if the exposure is in terms of population. Now, if the exposure, and this is very much applicable, pertinent to our businesses, if the exposure is in terms of our businesses, infrastructure, our hotels, our buildings, correct, there is a corresponding vulnerability parameter that we use, and that is your GDP in terms of damages and losses, your gross domestic product in terms of damages and losses, wherein the damages and losses are actually estimated, and then you consider the exposure, you consider the hazards, then you will be able to estimate the risk. Okay, so again, it doesn't have to you don't have to mix them up. So if the exposure is in terms of population, you can only use your HDI, Human Development Index, or the poverty incidence, and the exposure is your infrastructure, all right, your buildings, your hotels. Therefore, you can use the GDP in terms of damages and losses. Then when you consider your hazard, then you will be able to estimate your risk. Now, this is one example of what we did in the past. One of our research works. The hazard is tropical cyclone. The exposure is the population. The vulnerability is the Human Development Index. So if you look at the very first map, the color is red. So the redder the color, it means that there are more tropical cyclones that enter the Philippine area of responsibility, and they made their landfall in the Luzon area. Exposure, the bluer the color, it only means that there are more population in that particular area. And the vulnerability, the bluer the color, it means that the lowest were HDI, or the Human Development Index. So you just have to integrate your hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Then you will be able to calculate or estimate your risk. Now, aside from that, during COVID-19, we also made an analysis. Excuse me. We also made an analysis. It's a multi-hazard approach, because this has never been done, and that's the reason why our research institute, the Environmental and Climate Change Research Institute, started this particular initiative. So what is going to happen? You see that there is COVID-19 in this map, sea level rise. We also have flood, and we also have tropical cyclones. So one of the analysis was, what is going to happen? What is going to happen to the areas that are affected by COVID-19 if sea level rise is going to happen? So look at that. If you look at the color, high risk, the color red risk, the orange color means moderate risk, and the yellow color means yellow risk. So the same thing. What is going to happen in the areas that are affected by COVID-19 if flooding is going to happen? So we were able to map them out, all right? And the same thing, the same analysis that we applied if tropical cyclones or typhoons in a more layman's manner are going to make their landfall. So which will be areas that are considered to be high risk, moderate risk, and low risk. So these are just some of the studies that we conducted in the past. Now, aside from the track assessment, the risk assessment, we do also have the impact assessment. I call it GSB because it's my name, Glenn Espinada's Modified Impact Chain Assessment, wherein you have the Philippines, you have the region, you want to know what is really happening in the province, and you also want to know what particular municipality is affected. The climate stimulus, these are your climate stimuli, which means you are referring to rainfall or temperature. So is your municipality experiencing increasing amount of rainfall, and what about in terms of temperature? In terms of exposure and vulnerability, which are the exposed areas, or who are the exposed people, or who are the farmers, the fisher folks, and that has to be identified in the exposure. And in terms of sensitivity, who are again what particular areas that are actually sensitive? For example, in terms of sensitivity, we talk about the infrastructure, the small house and the big house. So which is more sensitive to different types of disasters or different types of hazards? The house with the small house or the big house. So these are some of the approaches that we apply, a very simple approach that we apply every time that we travel to different parts of the country and provide this kind of analysis. Now, there are different types of assessment under the impact assessment. So the impact assessment, by the way, this is where the qualitative approach comes in. It's not only limited to the technical aspect or the how would you call that, the quantitative aspect of the research, but it's also important to know the real experiences of the people, and these can only be validated by talking to them through focus group discussion or through key informative interviews, and that's the reason why we talk all these stakeholders. Now, in the biophysical assessment, there are tools that we provide. So it's, for instance, if we talk about biophysical, how many tropical cyclones do you encounter? So those are some of the questions. If you talk about socioeconomic assessment, for example, for the farmers, what was your yield before? What is your yield right now? For the fishery sector, what about your fish catch? How are you going to compare your fish catch before and what is your fish catch now? So these are just some of the questions. Now, we included in our research institute, we included the psychological assessment and the religious and spirituality. Why psychological? Because we really want to understand. In 2013, when Super Typhoon Haiyan or Yolanda made its landfall, there was food insecurity, there was water insecurity, and it took 3 months before electricity came in. Now, when we did our assessment to the people, because we talk about human security, when we did the analysis, when we talked to them, we found out that the areas that were affected by Yolanda, or 240 kilometer per hour super typhoon, that area, their post-traumatic growth, that is a psychological term, their post-traumatic growth is low. All right. So how will we know if it is high? So those areas that have been experiencing different types of hazards, meaning they are used to it, in terms of post-traumatic growth, is high. All right, but not for those people who are new and who are not really used to different types of disasters. The post-traumatic growth is low. So we call them post-traumatic growers. So it's just a matter of experiences, like what I mentioned. So the more you experience disasters, the more used to these different types of disasters, it only means that you are considered to be a post-traumatic grower. Now, another one is religiosity and spirituality assessment. This is very significant. Now, like what, when we did analysis, they said, for those people who were affected by different types of disasters, you know what they say? The reason why they were able to survive because of their faith, because of the level of spirituality. And that is the reason why we consider faith as a resilient armor. So once you identify them, you identify the adaptive capacity and then develop and the strategies which you think are very pertinent and very relevant to society. Now, if we talk about the business sector, you also have to provide them the list of these climate change adaptation or DRR strategies. Okay. So So it's not enough, all right? It's not enough that you do your track assessment, you also have your risk assessment. So it's not also enough that you have your impact assessment, because it's also important. What are the policies, all right? What are the Republic Acts? So you have your Climate Change Act, you also have your Disaster Reduction and Management Act. Now, what are the what are the programs, all right? What are the programs? What are the projects that are aligned, all right, that can be developed and implemented in the community, or for example in your what in your sorry, it's very disturbing because I am in the restaurant right now. So okay, that sound really disturbs me. Okay, so the projects and programs, we want to make sure that the programs and projects that are going to be developed and implemented are aligned to the international and the national climate change action plan. Wherein these 7 priority areas are your food security, sustainable energy, water sufficiency. You also have your human security, the number 5, ecological environmental stability. Number 6, you have the climate smart services and disaster resilient infrastructure. And number 7, you have the knowledge management capacity building. Again, like what I mentioned, we want to make sure that the projects and programs that are going to be implemented in the business sector, all right, are aligned to the international and national frameworks. And then after that, you move on to your action plans. So these are the 7 priority areas. Now, Climate Smart Philippines is not only adaptation, because the one that I mentioned to you, they're all the strategies for the adaptation. What about for mitigation? Mitigation, this is where you want to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions. So how do we do that? Oh, okay. How do we do that? What we do is we assess, all right? What are the different ways and how you're going to assess your greenhouse gases in the form of carbon dioxide equivalent? So this is where the different strategies come in, your net zero emissions, the decarbonization, the low carbon diet strategies. This is where you assess, all right, estimate your GHGs, and then establish the roadmap, and then apply different strategies. So this is how we do it in our organization. And this is what we also offer and we also provide to the different sectors. So it's not only for the private sector, but also includes the service that we provide to the national government, to the local government units, to the CSOs, and even to the universities and colleges. So we have net zero emission tool for the building infrastructure. We also have for the energy, fuel consumption, transportation. We also have for the waste, for the food, and even for the humans. Because it's also important to determine the net zero emission by a human being and the net zero emissions from the agricultural sector. So that's all. So basically, the Climate Smart Philippines, like what I mentioned, is, well, it's more than a program. It's more than a project. Because what we do is really more empowerment and the empowerment of the different stakeholders in order to create positive impacts and changes in the lives of our people. That's all, and thank you very much for listening.
Okay.
Thank you, Glenn.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us, Glenn. About your talk, we have a mountain of questions weighing in on our minds right now, but we're supposed to hold them up until our open forum portion. However, perhaps we can unload 1 or 2 questions for now. So the fourth, would you like to clarify about the talk of the Environmental Climate Change and Research Institute president?
Actually, yes,
questions?
I'd like to ask how the workflow is between, you mentioned that aside from the national government and the local government units, you also provide advice for the private sector. How does, could you explain the dynamics of how you're able to provide advisory services to them? Do they approach you? Do you already have existing linkages? At least maybe we can get a clearer picture of that. I think, Glenn, your mic is still on mute. Can you hear us, Glenn? Perhaps, Conrad, that the connection has been...
Okay, yeah. So I think we might as well proceed to our... is everything okay? Not yet. So I think...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll just hold up the rest of the questions for later for our open forum. So let us proceed to our second speaker. As I mentioned earlier, our second speaker is no stranger to me, as I often edit his lengthy and data-heavy contributions to our columns in the business section. But his columns are very, very informative. People should really listen to this social scientist because he is the real deal. Starting with being one of the top 5 engineering graduates from his batch at the Don Bosco Technical College, and being the president of his student body, he has earned his executive master in disaster risk and crisis management from the Asian Institute of Management as one of the top 4 in his class in his second term. Aside from having an MBA from the University of San Carlos, he also graduated with merit from the Strategic Business Economics program of the University of Asia and the Pacific. He also holds a diploma in supply chain management under the Business and Training Linkage program of the PUM Entrepreneur for Entrepreneurs at The Hague, Netherlands. And he was awarded the ACE Chairman Scholarship for the ACE Ashridge Executive Development Program at the Ashridge Business School in the United Kingdom. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you my dear friend and esteemed columnist and colleague, Dr. Ludwig Wiggy Federigan, the Young Environmental Forum President. So, Dr. Wiggy, the screen is yours.
First and foremost, thank you so much to my editor, Conrad Carino, and of course to the Manila Times for this invitation for today, especially to the president, Ma'am Blanca. My presentation to you today, which I already made mention earlier, is a little bit briefed, but I'm happy that the first presenter, who is a good friend of mine, Glenn, have already provided context on our discussion, and although the approach is a little bit academic, but I wish that our viewers have was able to adapt to that presentation. There are a lot of terminologies that have to be understood in the lens of the climate change and disaster risk. The one that I prepared for today is more of the more on common tao conversation, because I do not want to dwell on the technical jargons when we talk of the DRR and climate change. Perhaps that can be better explained during the question and answer later on. So to start with, we know today our country continues to face the continuous threat of COVID-19 and potential health-related risks, which may be further exacerbated by the worsening climate. The context of this presentation is not to discuss the science of the climate change, because on our purview, that has been settled already in numerous reports and numerous pronouncements. I believe that businesses today must embrace resiliency and sustainability as their top priorities to ensure that humankind will continue to survive and thrive. We need to build a system that is more resilient in facing pandemics, climate change, and other emerging global challenges. In this presentation, I will share with everyone within the Zoom and with our viewers online 8 environmental friendly initiatives that businesses can adopt to ensure that climate change considerations are being implemented and observed in everyday processes and operations. Based on my practice, I had the opportunity also to review and provide assurances to large corporations as far as their sustainability reports are concerned. No? And this I have been doing for the past 5 years. I just recently had an assessment of one conglomerate, no, whose business interests are really varied, no, from extractive industries to our common needs, like water, no. So let me share with you the actions that will make our daily operations more climate friendly. And I'm starting it with what you see in the screen, which is rainwater harvesting. No? Rainwater harvesting can serve as an alternative source of water. It provides water when there is drought and can help mitigate flooding. The harvested rainwater can be used for cleaning office spaces, flushing toilets, and gardening. No? Unknown to many, Republic Act 6716, or otherwise known as the Rainwater Collector and Springs Development Law, mandates the construction of water wells and rainwater collectors, developing springs and rehabilitating existing water wells in barangays nationwide. Try to imagine if all of these are physically installed in every barangay in the entire country, 52,000 barangays. Perhaps, especially in Metro Manila, perhaps we wouldn't be experiencing the flooding that most of the urban areas are experiencing today. No? But unfortunately, I think only a very few percentage in Metro Manila or even in barangays in Metro Manila have this kind of installations. No? My next second initiative is greening workspaces. No? Through simple ways, we can convert vacant spaces at our offices and homes, even in public spaces, to plant fruits, vegetables, and herbs for food sufficiency and sustainability. I think we've seen this during the pandemic, when all of us are under lockdown for practically almost a year and more. And a lot have been going into urban gardening, no? Converting most of their spaces into food gardens. No? Not only those who have very big spaces, but including condominium units, even if they have a small space, no, they would convert that small space to have a food garden. No? We know that having plants and trees improves air quality, reduces stress, and enhances the environmental landscape of our workspaces. Just ensure that we plant species that are native to our area and can withstand the present problems such as pollution, floods, and etc. The third initiative is reducing energy consumption and harnessing solar and other renewable energy sources. No? Today, more and more establishments are choosing renewable energy. On-site renewable power generation, like the use of solar panels, is a way to cut emissions related to electricity consumption. Installing energy-efficient lights by replacing incandescent lamps with compact fluorescent lamps or light-emitting diodes, turning off the lights in the office in the evening, slightly lowering the heating or the air conditioning unit, or taking devices off the plugs when it's not needed are some good actions we can implement. No? In terms of the use of solar, the market right now is very positive. In fact, there are a lot of the solar installators who are providing installation at installment basis. No, you do not need actually to pay upfront just to have to install a solar rooftop. No, I mean, if it is a household. No, so we can see also the prices of solar in the global market, including the Philippine market, are going down. These were the supply and demand actually plays. No, it's an economic principle. So these where supply and demand plays. No, so when there is more demand for installation of solar panels, we would expect that prices for this would eventually go down. The fourth initiative is related to the one that you see in the photo, is about waste. No? So implementing solid waste management practices, recycling, reusing, and refusing single-use plastics, and reducing food waste. No? Aside from dangerous pollutants to bodies of water, single-use plastic are fossil fuel products that contribute to global warming and climate change. You know? People might be asking why those people talking about climate change would always use the word fossil fuel. No? Simply because these are sources that are actually buried under the ground that we try to unearth and use it as a form of energy. And in the real sense of the word, when you talk of fossil fuel, we're actually talking of oil, coal, and gas. No? In the Philippines, predominantly our electricity is supplied by fossil fuel. At least more than 50% of our sources of energy. No? So shifting to products in reusable containers or to products sold in bulk is a solution to reduce the amount of plastic waste generated. Another way to reduce our climate footprint is to reduce the amount of waste that goes to the landfills. No? Segregate waste by the type, meaning we sort and separate the recyclable from non-recyclable. Recyclable materials such as newspapers, glass bottles, aluminum cans, and discarded metal parts can be sent to junk shops and recycling facilities. The food waste that we generate also leave a higher carbon footprint. In order to reduce the portion of biodegradable waste, we have to consume food responsibly. Unavoidable byproducts of food such as leaves and branches, vegetable and fruit peels can be used as natural fertilizers through biodegradable composting. The enactment of the Extended Producer Responsibility Act of 2022, which lapsed into law last month, paved the way for big corporations, manufacturers, and distributors to be responsible for the packaging waste that they produced. The fifth initiative I wanted to share with you is what we call choosing greener equipment and sustainable suppliers. No? Choose more environmentally friendly suppliers and equipment, or when the time comes to buy new office materials or machines, if the old ones cannot be fixed or more are needed, choose the most energy-wise and sustainable ones. We should also make the effort to choose suppliers who demonstrate good environmental practices. So it is one of the things that we always look at when we do assessment of sustainability of companies, whether large corporations have adopted and embraced environmental policies. No? Similarly, when their procurement would show that their suppliers have also adopted and embraced environmental policy. It is also important to use equipment and devices properly to avoid them getting deteriorated faster and to repair gadgets when they break down instead of replacing them with new ones. The sixth initiative that I wanted to share with you is optimizing employees' transportation and promoting environmentally friendly ways of working. We have seen this during the pandemic, no? And I guess the way work has to be done lately will no longer be on a physical mode, no? Because perhaps the pandemic have taught us that some things have to be changed in the way we do things, no? But other than that, we have also to understand that transportation is one of the largest sectors of greenhouse gas emissions, no? That contributes to the warming of the planet. By encouraging our employees to use sustainable modes of transportation, or by providing them shuttle services, companies can significantly reduce their indirect carbon dioxide emissions and therefore their impact on the changing climate. Some ways of working are more ecological than others, like telecommuting, for example, has many ecological advantages. One can also consider video conferences that avoid employees traveling by car or meeting with clients. The seventh initiative is building capacities to prepare and respond to climate and health risks. No? Understanding local climate and disaster risk and improving multi-hazard early warning systems will ensure early action and preparedness to disaster. No? Now we are focusing now on the preparedness side and the preventive part, no, of the disaster risk reduction and management. We have to ensure that our buildings and infrastructures can cope with extreme weather events such as strong typhoons and floods. We have to incorporate expected climate impacts in planning and decision making, such as undertaking a climate risk assessment in our vicinity. Strengthening capacities in emergency preparedness and response, including warning system communication protocols, evacuation procedures, contingency and recovery planning, and regular simulation exercise and drills in the establishment and facilities will not only save lives, but will also enable to build back better from the cascading impacts of extreme weather events. No? Perhaps the post-pandemic activity of most large corporations is to look into their business continuity plans, no? And that has been a very important tool, no? That a lot have realized when the COVID-19 pandemic struck us in 2020. And the last initiative that I wanted to share with everyone is raising awareness through information dissemination and capacity building. We all have a role to play in raising awareness of our employees, partners, media, and other stakeholders. Organizing webinars and learning sessions like this to raise and improve awareness on climate, resiliency, and sustainable issues is a great idea. These initiatives gradually create the ground for best practices that individuals then reproduce at home and transmit to our families, friends, and communities. Therefore, in closing, there's a greater need to climate-proof our offices and facilities now more than ever. For we do not have the luxury of time to remain still if we aim to halt the trend of the devastating impacts of climate change to our business. Through this webinar and beyond, let us learn from one another, support each other's climate actions, advise on strategies, and strike convergence where possible. We in the Young Environmental Forum are looking forward to work with all of you to further survive and thrive within this crucial decade and beyond. I trust that you will be our staunch partners in raising awareness for sustainable development, mobilizing direct action, and promoting solutions to climate change. Let us work together as a community, as a nation, and as one planet toward a safer, sustainable, and resilient future for us and the next generation. Before I end this talk, I just wanted to share this very good quote, no, from the book Principles of Purposeful Business. No? The purpose of business, they say, is to solve the problems of people and planet profitably, and not profit from causing problems. Thank you so much, and I hope you learned a lot from this presentation.
Thank you for your information and insights said in a more consumer-friendly language, Ludwig. It's good we're able to bring in the common folk and make them understand, because they are among those most affected by disaster risk and climate effects. So, Conrad, do you have any questions for the president of the Environmental Forum about his presentation?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask one question about rainwater harvesting. I've been hearing of that, I think, for the past 5 years. And I'm very sure that, the big companies or even the environmentalists have heard of this. So my question is, do you think we should have a law or a law passed in Congress requiring all big building owners and major establishments to incorporate rainwater harvesting into their systems, so that we could? We have a lot of rains lately, and it just gets washed away to the rivers and to the seas. So that's my question for you, Dr. Wiggy.
Thank you for your question, Conrad. No, for me, I believe that there has to be a law that requires buildings, industrial areas to do rainwater harvesting. You are right that lately we have so much rain, and I guess with the continuous warming of the planet, we would continue to receive more rainfall. No, and it is just very logical that all of this rain, instead of them going to the canals, we can catch them and make full use of them. No, take note. No, we can use it for other purposes, and at the same time, it helps us, to reduce flooding in our streets, especially in the metro, in highly urbanized areas. So these are double purpose, for this kind of the infrastructure.
Thank you very much, sir, for your answer.
Ludwig, I'd like to give a follow-up question regarding that. What do you think are the steps to be able to bring into the program, even down to the local government level? How can we progress into that kind of space?
For the rainwater harvesting?
Yes.
During the pandemic, at least we're still in the pandemic, but at the height of the pandemic, I had the opportunity to visit the Bangsang Moro Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, specifically the provinces of the Maguindanao and Sultan Kudarat. And then we zero in on 2 municipalities in Maguindanao. This is in North Upi, which is located in the upper part of Maguindanao, meaning in the mountain. And on the lowland, we visited Dato Abdullah Sangki. This is a town next to, I think, Sultan Kudarat itself. But Tama, I think that's the down on the border of the Maguindanao. And we realized in that particular town, actually the municipal disaster risk reduction and management officer can actually predict when flooding would happen in that particular area. Okay, it's a landlocked town. But every time there is a strong rain that would hit, for example, the mountains of Bukidnon, in a matter of 2 to 3 days or 48 to 72 hours, those water would flow down in that particular town in Maguindanao, which is Dato Abdullah Sangki. And they can practically forecast how long that water would subside in that town. So one of the proposals that they did to the mayor of that town, who is now the governor of the Sultan Kudarat, very young governor of Sultan Kudarat, is really to install rainwater harvesting in every barangay in that particular town. It's a small town, 26,000 people, so with only 10 barangays. So pretty easy for them to install rainwater harvesting for their area, just to prevent the flooding in the area. We also provided costing for the installation, with the help of engineers who can do rainwater harvesting installation. And at least this one we could push, for example, in the municipal budget that they propose every year. In the absence of any law right now, for the construction of rainwater harvesting catchment, local government units can do that. No? And they can also include that in their local climate change action plan. No? It is a mandate of the law that every local government unit have to have that local climate change action plan, and having rainwater harvesting is a measure that can be included in LCCAP.
Okay, thank you for that very insightful answer. I think, Conrad, we have a special surprise for our viewers. A representative of the private sector will be joining us as a panelist to share his insights on corporate sustainability from the perspective of the man on the street, so to speak, especially in the communities in which his company operates.
Well, that's very interesting. So who will be this panelist of ours?
Actually, he's a fellow Atenean.
Okay.
And throughout his career as a communications executive, he has held leadership roles in the Philippines and the ASEAN region even. He's worked in and lived in cities such as Bangkok and Kuala Lumpur. So in his current role, he supports his company's sustainability team in implementing programs across their whole ecosystem of, they have a whole lot of businesses. So for them to be able to implement a responsible community development, so they're not just reactive, but they're actually constantly being able to help their respective communities throughout the country adapt and prepare. As Ludwig had mentioned. So in other words, our next, or rather our panelists who will be helping us facilitate the further discussion, helps to ensure the integrity of the whole sustainability communications to their various stakeholders. And through these programs, their community, their corporation mobilizes in these communities their most valued resources. So this also includes, of course, people themselves, in order for everything and everyone to work together through sustainable business objectives, and thereby, as also mentioned earlier in their video, it's actually the resiliency and the growth of the people in their communities that helps drive growth for their business as well. So he's none other than Miguel Mercado, Vice President for Corporate Communications at SM Investments Corporation. Welcome, Mr. Mercado.
Yeah, welcome, Mr. Mercado. Okay.
Yes, may we call you Miguel?
Yes, please call me Miguel, and thank you for having us here. It is such a great time to be listening to Mr. Glenn and Mr. Ludwig. In fact, I'd like to react to things that they said. I'd like to react first to the last point that Mr. Ludwig said about creating awareness for the environment, for sustainability. In fact, that echoes very well what we have learned. In SM, we have been doing our sustainability programs for lots and lots of years. And from what we know that it will take a greater effort than just ourselves to make it happen, which is exactly what Mr. Ludwig said. But we also know that sometimes when we talk sustainability, it's such a big word that some people get intimidated by it, especially in the era that we have communication that's to 8 seconds. I mean, we need to get people's attention within 8 seconds. And sometimes when we talk about sustainability, it's too big. Or when they talk about environmental concerns and changes, it's too scary. So what we've done is to adapt to this kind of situation. And we tried, just like Mr. Ludwig said, we tried to adapt the communications in a way that translates our sustainability programs in bite-sized information. We call it the SM Green Movement. And within the SM Green Movement, we have 3 pillars, namely the green planet, green living, and green culture. But I'd like to also put focus on 2 things we've done. Within Green Planet, we have 3 programs, which is water, waste, and energy management. But just also to echo what Mr. Ludwig had said, in terms of water management, I'm glad that he mentioned the rainwater systems, because we have implemented our own rainwater catchments already in at least 20 of our malls. And in fact, the impact that has with our communities is quite felt, because aside from capturing, at least in one mall, we capture about enough water to fill up 17 Olympic-sized pools. And that has helped the flooding. More than that, it has also helped us in recycling the water, so that about 35% of all the water within our malls are recycled. Plus, we get to use it within our malls and within the community for cleaning, for watering plants and all. And these are the kinds of things that we have put within our system also. And we made it simple enough. I think also from what Mr. Glenn has said earlier, when he was looking at tracking and looking at the impact, we have that information too, and we use it to help our communities. In fact, in one of our malls in SM Marikina, it is a place where there is some flooding that happens in big typhoons. So with that in mind, what we did was to build the mall in stilts. So as it is in stilts, it is higher. In fact, the parking lot, the first level of the parking lot, is higher than the highest flooding levels. We did that so that business can continue during floods, but also so that we can protect our tenants and we can protect our community within. So when there's a flood happens, they can and they have gone to our malls to seek refuge from this. So water catchment, disaster resilience are among the things that we're glad that we are working in parallel with what Mr. Ludwig and Mr. Glenn has said.
Yeah, so Miguel, before we start asking our two speakers questions about their talks, Conrad and I actually have a few queries for you about further information about SM and its particular take on corporate sustainability. So how do you communicate to your stakeholders, your employees and the people in the communities in which SM operates? Because as we had earlier discussion, you mentioned that sometimes it feels very detached from the everyday experiences of people. And at the same time, to them, it just seems like, yeah, we're already doing that. The Jaryo Bote and the whole Kanin Baboy that everyday people do to be able to recycle and reuse seeming waste. And even in terms of the kind of food that's prepared, if you think of sisig, that's actually the products, the parts of the pig that people normally don't eat, but the Filipinos have innovated and turned it into a delicacy. So your communication and education programs for the people in your communities?
I think, first of all, it starts out with us trying to learn what our consumers, our partners, know about and how they feel about it. And what we've known, as said earlier, is that sometimes sustainability is just so big and intimidating. But then when you break it down, you realize that as Filipinos, we've already been doing sustainable practices. Recycling. If we go to a refrigerator, we'll see that maybe it's old water bottles, PET bottles that we bought, that we use now for our water. We also recycle food, we recycle our bottles and all of that through Jaryo Bote. That has been there. And what we're trying to do is to also communicate in this way. We need to be part of sustainable programs, but we also need to know that we can do it and we have to do it, and we have to do it as a whole. Now, within SM, within our employers and within our partners, we're also instituting some programs like the Sustainability School. So we have an in-house sustainability school for our 135,000 or so employees. And currently, we've done it also in modules where you can take it online and you can take the courses in your own pace. So far, we've had about 30,000 of our employees take it. So it's good steps, little steps to make sustainability reachable, doable, and shareable.
Thank you, Miguel. Conrad, do you have any further questions for Miguel in terms of SM initiatives and their communications methods?
No, I have no questions at the moment, but I'm sure I will have questions when it comes to the open forum. to all this to all our panelists today. So we can go to the open forum.
Okay, then. So Miguel and Conrad, let's unload that whole amount of queries that we mentioned earlier. And we can invite the Environmental and Climate Change Research Institute President and the Young Environmental Forum Executive Director to field questions. So Glenn and Wiggy, we're now in the open forum portion. Miguel, feel free to jump in anytime and give your own 2 cents worth also, like you did so earlier, as well as formulate your own questions based on what the answers that our speakers give.
Take care.
So, yeah, great. Let the open forum begin. Conrad, you have the first question.
Yes, I'd like to throw this question to SM. I'd like to also know how much effort has SM gone into assuring the sustainability of its agriculture products, because we know very well that that agriculture also could also damage the environment if farmers use so much fertilizers or something like that. So I'd like to ask the initiatives of the SM group on this matter, because lately I've been going to SM and I see there are stalls for organically grown vegetables. So that's my question.
Hi, Conrad. So part of one of the initiatives that we're doing is called Green Finds. And Green Finds is actually a program where we'll work, first of all, it comes from a learning that some of our consumers are saying, how come when I want sustainable products, it's either hard to find or expensive? So we started a Green Finds program where we work with our suppliers and start to journey with them on sustainability. So we try to source them locally, we try to look for sustainable products, and with that journey, we create places where consumers can find it. In fact, we have this Green Finds, so wherever you go in the mall, and it has just started, you can see the mark of Green Finds. And it's basically us putting in the forefront for our consumers the choices, the green choices that they can do, but also journeying with our suppliers, including our farmers, for sustainable practices. We also have a startup marketplace where we work with starting up entrepreneurs, including farmers, where they can get access to our market and begin their own journey. So those are among the things that we are doing.
Yeah, thank you very much for your answer, sir. I'd like also to pose a question to Dr. Federica. How do you gauge the interest of the millennials and the Gen Z towards, the environmental causes? Because what I observe is that we are in this age of overconsumption, and it's very easy for millennials right now and Gen Zs to buy a lot of products just to find out that they will just throw this away some of the things they buy. So how aware are the younger generation towards preserving the environment?
Thank you for that question, Conrad. If I would base my answer on research studies, the present generation that we have right now, the Gen Z and the millennials, have a higher social consciousness of what is happening in the environment. So that higher social consciousness can be translated also on how they view purchasing of the products, whether these products are environmentally friendly or whether these products are sustainable. So in most surveys that you can find, climate change and sustainability would always rank up either top 3 of the issues or top 5 of the issues. During pandemic, of course, pandemic is a major concern, but if you remove pandemic, climate and sustainability are top issues. 2 days ago, I was reading the report published by the United Nations Development Program entitled "The World We Want" for the year 2021. This is a consultation among Filipino young people. And in that particular consultation, the most prominent concerns that they have, actually. Is number one, the existence of the natural events that become disasters, no? And these are extreme weather events, flooding, and so forth. Number two, of course, COVID, and of course, number three, the concern on the climate crisis and the climate emergency. No, so if we factor it in on how they would practice it, I am confident that when they buy products, they would look for products that have less damage, no, to the environment. No? So on my side, I'm very positive, no, of our young generation. What we need is to provide them the platform, no, or even the mechanism to be able to be involved in more action, including policy making. No, because even if they are young, they have very good ideas. No, I have worked with a lot of young people, and I've seen that their ideas may be revolutionary. Some of them may be revolutionary, but they are very strong ideas that that our government people can actually consider, including the private sector.
Maybe we can ask Glenn to chime in terms of how the youth can join in and be able to recommend policies and programs that can further revolutionize the movement. Glenn?
Yes. Thank you very much. Actually, all of my researchers are young. I have 45 junior research scientists, and they're all students. And part of the task, part of the advocacy, is really to give them the exposure what is really happening on the ground. I'll just give you 5 minutes. I'm going to share with you where we have been, so that we will be able to understand what we do, because it's really more than an assessment. So, can you see it? So this is in Mindanao region. This is part of the Climate Smart Philippines, wherein we partnered with different stakeholders in the country. In Mindanao, we were able to partner with MINDA, the Mindanao Development Authority, wherein MINDA is considered to be the coordinating body. And part of our MOU with MINDA is the promotion, implementation of food, energy, water for unit nexus system, and the training for all the stakeholders in Mindanao. And that includes the academe, the youth, the women, the church leaders, the CSOs, NGOs, the community of farmers, fishers, indigenous people, the national and the local government. So these are all the areas in Davao City, Sarangani province. I travel together with my junior research scientists, Sultan Kudarat, South Cotabato, Tacurong in Mindanao, General Santos, Cagayan de Oro City, and every time I provide every time I provide the kind of training, you cannot just tell them, oh, these are the things that you should do. You cannot do that in a certain area, because in a given province or city or municipality, there will always be mismatch. This is what the governor wants. This is what the mayor wants. But after the assessment, they will find out that, Sir Glenn, this is not what we want pala, because the real need of our community is this particular climate change adaptation solution for this particular solution. And that's the reason why before the start of the training or capacity building, we see to it that they undergo a science-based capacity development. Okay. In Mindanao, we were able to partner with the IOG because we created a network in the Mindanao region together with MINDA, NEDA, DOST, ECCRI, the Global Greenwood Institute, and my co-Harvard alumni, the Harvard Kennedy School Alumni Association of the Philippines. And then we also had the Climate Smart Bangsamoro. It's really good that Ludwig mentioned Bangsamoro, because we have partnership with Bangsamoro. We call it the Climate Smart Bangsamoro, and our main partner is the MENDE. So the same approach with MINDA. We also provide trainings, capacity development to the provincial and local government, with academia, the civil society, NGOs, POs, the private sector. So every time I travel, like what I mentioned, I bring my junior research scientists, because I want them to feel, I want them to understand what is really happening on the ground. And it cannot be done if you're just going to teach them on in the four corners of the classroom. And the main experience for them to understand and for them to appreciate and embrace science and embrace the solutions that they can provide is to go to the community and talk to the people. So this is in the Visayas, in Boracay, Malay, Climate Smart later. Bohol, Masbate, Sorsogon, Aurora, Batanes, Palawan, in partnership with Palawan Council for Sustainable Development, Kuwas of Quirino Province, Benguet and Baguio, Pangasinan, in Luzon, Bataan. This is in Quezon, Polillo. This is the best example. Why? Because in Luzon area, and this is based on the analysis, Polillo Island, specifically the Homalig Island, that is the most at risk. All right, because it's a flat island. If you have been to Homalig, it's a flat area. So one tsunami, hope it's not going to happen. Everyone will die. It's a very good island, but it's the most at risk. It's facing Pacific Ocean, but there's no mountain. There's no mountain. That's why one tsunami, if it happens, I hope it's not going to happen, everyone will die. That's the most at-risk island in the country. We also have Tarlac, wherein we partner with the OML, the Oscar M. Lopez Center, wherein we installed ultrasonic flood detector system. This is in Mindoro, with the IPs of Mindoro, Batangas, San Luis, in Balayan, and of course in Batangas with Mark, with friend. And then, like what I mentioned, Climate Smart Philippines is not only for the LGUs, because we train our farmers and fisher folks. We don't train them to become scientists. Part of the empowerment, part of the training is for them to realize that they can always make a difference regardless of their status. Now, this is for the indigenous people in the different parts of the country. Why indigenous people? Because our IPs are very knowledgeable in IPRA, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. So, for example, if you are in the business sector and they will ask for our help, my question will always be, okay, we have to identify, these processes. Well, we have to undergo FDIC, for instance, the free prior informed consent, because that is very much relevant if the project is going to be installed or going to be built in an IT community. So this is for the academy. We were able to train the different universities and colleges in the Philippines, more than 500 university colleges, because, I cannot travel. We cannot travel all the time. And part of the capacity development is to train all these universities to take care of their own locality. So the same type of training, the track risk impact policy together with programs and projects, because they are the ones who are living in that community, and they're the ones who can protect and who can help their local government units and their private sector to identify and develop the most pertinent solution in their community in order to address the needs of their community. So, of course, in the private sector, all right, that is the Davao Chamber of Commerce that's in Mindanao, of course, Sir Hans in SM, and the different Chamber of Commerce in the Philippines, and other partners, like, for example, NASA, the international organization. So these are some of our partners. So I'll stop here. Sorry. So again, to answer your question, it is very much important that to let the students, or to let the youth to understand. And in order for them to understand the nature of climate change, is for them to be part of it. All right, in order to embrace the solutions, in order for them to actually recommend what is really the thing that needs to be addressed in a municipality or in a locality. So thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thank you. Miguel, this has been, SM has had a similar experience in its various areas where you have very unique and varied needs that require consultancy, especially with the youth sectors in the various areas where SM operates, right?
Yes, we do. And I think it's very, very inspiring from what Mr. Glenn had shared. It's great that he is within that team and that he's able to spread out that news. I think also, just as an anecdote, I was in a conversation with my daughter who is in university right now, and we were just talking about courses in college, and I said, if I were to go back to college, I will take up sustainability. She laughed at me because she said, Pop, there is no sustainability course that I know, because sustainability is already embedded in everything that we learn. So I just want to echo what Mr. Glenn has said too. I think I belong to an older generation that's getting, that might have caused a lot of these problems because of the old economy. But we're learning now. We're learning with these things. And I think part of this whole educational or awareness, what they call challenge, is that at least in school and in social media, where, as Mr. Ludwig has also said, social media has made people more purpose-driven. That is the kind of society we have. They're purpose-driven, and the good thing is global purposes like sustainability and the environment has come across. But now, how do we connect that with the platforms, with programs where they can really contribute? And within our own system, let's say for waste management, we have what we call trash to cash, where on Fridays, we help people by collecting their trash, and then we pay for it, but then we also recycle it. It's a national program where we use our molds to help not just generate and recycle the trash. It also creates the awareness for importance like this. And I think aside from the youth, where we'll have a lot of hope, we also have to spread it around to a bigger part of our population too, so that we're not just worried about, it is important to worry about our daily problems, but we also have at the same time to worry about the very, very important climate challenges that we have for today.
That's right. So, Conrad, we have questions from one of our business reporters for both our speakers. Would you like to give some of them for them to reply?
Great. Before that,
Yes.
From Donna. I think we don't have any at the moment, but I'm going to ask one sensitive question to, any of the panelists can answer this. Do we have to be very frank about the fact that one day some local officials would have to face the fact that their municipalities or localities would be unlivable and will have to, be written off the LGU map? Because, let's face it, there are a lot of towns that really gets hit very badly by disasters, and there's nothing you could do except to, relocate the people and make it no man's land. I'd like, so can anybody answer that question?
Maybe Ludwig can start.
Yeah.
Thank you, Conrad. No, and I just wanted to say hi to a good friend, Glenn. Glenn, congratulations on your latest award. To answer Conrad, if you would consider sea level rise, based on climate modeling in the Philippines, based on projection, 60% of our coastal communities will be affected by sea level rise. And it's a lot easier now because the modeling is readily available in different platforms. You could actually see whether on what particular year a particular area would be would have water coming from the ocean. Last year during the pandemic, I was part of one study, one research study that was submitted in NDCP on sea level rise. And I modeled 8 areas in the Philippines. And I realized that there is one particular island very near Samar that when I look at that island and model it on a sea level rise by the year 2050, that particular island would actually disappear. And I think it may be bad news to inform certain localities at some point in time. They may disappear on the map, but I think we have the responsibility to inform them, and to advise them that there has to be mechanisms and interventions to be made just in case all of this become a reality. 2050 is still 28 years to go. And there's still a lot of things that can be done by then. But with the ongoing increase of our temperature, there has to be interventions and plans to be made by our local leaders, especially those areas that are identified to be affected by sea level rise. Back to you,
Thank you very much.
Conrad.
Yeah. Okay, we have a question here from Bella Cariaso, our business reporter assigned to the environmental beat. On the mandatory rainwater catchment, has there been a proposal submitted to Congress? Do we expect the proposed bill to be filed both in the Senate and House of Representatives if there is such an initiative? So that's the question. And of course, I'd like to add, is this very urgent to file a bill on water catch or rainwater harvesting? So any of the panelists can answer this question.
Yeah, hi. Hello.
Yes.
Oh, hi, Ludwig. Nice to see you again. And hi, Miguel. To answer that question, actually, there's no, because the installation of the rainwater harvesting system is considered to be a climate change adaptation solution or a climate change adaptation option. Now, we don't have a specific, like what I mentioned, there's no specific bill, right, to use rainwater harvesting system. And as far as I know, as far as I remember, because everything has to be broad. Remember, like what I said, it's only one of them. And in the Philippines, you have different climate change adaptation solutions for food security, sustainable energy, water sufficiency, human security, the 7 priority areas of National Climate Change Action Plan. And rainwater harvesting system is only one of them. And like what I mentioned, every particular area, every province, every city, every municipality, there is a corresponding hazard that we need to address. And rainwater harvesting system is only one of the CCA solutions. So meaning, if you really want to have, actually there is already what we call the Climate Change Act and the Climate Change Adaptation, Climate Change Mitigation. They are already there. Now, in addition, there is also what we call financing program. We call it the PSF, or the People Survival Fund, which can be accessed by the local government units. It's a 1 billion grant by the local government units at the same time by the accredited local community organizations. Now, who can access this? The LGUs, as long as the project, all right, the project is considered to be a climate change adaptation project, all right, and rainwater harvesting system is one of them. So, for example, if I am LGUA and I found out based on my analysis, based on the assessment that I need a rainwater harvesting system, then I can use it. All right, and I can develop a proposal, submit this proposal to CCC, Climate Change Office, the Climate Change Commission, or to Department of Finance, so that my project can be financed by this PSF. So, like what I mentioned, this particular project, it doesn't have to be a business as usual project. It has to be science-based. It has to be evidence-based. And before you can get that funding, so usually the national panel of technical experts would evaluate. All right, if you have, for instance, you have the Enhanced Comprehensive Land Use Plan. So when we say Enhanced Comprehensive Land Use Plan, the CCADRM is already included. Your CDPs, or Comprehensive Development Plan, it has to be enhanced. Your CDRA, or the CDRVA, or Climate Disasters Vulnerability Assessment, is also part of it. Plus, number 4, you also have the Local Climate Change Action Plan. So meaning, before you access this People Survival Fund, you have to have those 4, right? Those 4 assessments. And honestly, I'm very sorry to tell this, not all the local government units were able to complete those 4 requirements in order to access the People Survival Fund. And it's really hard. If you really want to access it, you have to have those 4. And this is mandated by the law. It's there. And like what Ludwig mentioned a while ago, it's if you want the LCCAP, right? The LCCAP is really a requirement by the Department of Interior and Local Government. So thank you so much.
Ludwig, would you like to add to that?
Well, I totally agree with Glenn, especially in accessing People Survival Fund. That fund, as he said, is 1 billion, and if I'm not mistaken, as of the moment, there is only around almost 400 million that has been accessed. No? So there is still a available of 600 million funding, no, that can be accessed by local government units or by any accredited organization, no, in partnership with a local government unit. Perhaps in addition to what Glenn have said in terms of requirements, LGU should also have their own annual investment plan, because there seems to be a counterpart, no, for this project once they are proposed to the Climate Change Commission. No? But I understand there are efforts on the government side to simplify the process so that there would be more local government units who will be able to access the fund. No? Take note that this fund should not be part of the, let's say, proposed projects by any elected official in a particular district, meaning it should not be part of the Government Appropriations Act. It is not part of the program of any national department. It is really very specific for a particular local government unit, which they would also provide the necessary counterpart for this project.
Miguel, could you tell us more about how SM interfaces with the local government units in your area, various areas in the country, in terms of disaster response?
Well, I guess it's a case-to-case basis, but I think if we put into example two malls, one in Masinag, where there was flooding, it was working with the local government unit to study before the mall had been developed what kind of flooding there was, and therefore putting in the water catchment system. Now, in Marikina, it was about really making the mall a place of refuge when it comes to flooding incidences. There are a lot more details that I don't have with me now, but wherever our properties are, we work with the local community as well to look at certain gaps where we can address. Let's say through our foundation, we build schools. We also have scholarships. So there's lots of ways that we are able to communicate and work with the local LGUs. I hope I answered the question.
Yes. In terms of this subtopic, we have a question from Mick Bessa, one of our viewers, specifically for Glenn, in terms of where can we get in-depth information about this particular subtopic? Is it available in Climate Smart Philippines?
Yes, yeah, actually, it's also one of the articles that I wrote for the Manila Times. The Harvard Veritas column, it's every Thursday. I just want to know what particular subtopic he is referring to. Are we talking about the climate financing program? So I have an article about it. It's not only for PSF, but in that particular article, I listed down all the different financing mechanisms, including the multilateral funds, the GCF, the Green Climate Fund, the GEF, ODA, and so on and so forth. I can provide him the list. So
Yes.
he's nothing to worry about that. So the list of different funds, all right, not only in the Philippines, but of course around the globe, and what particular projects are going to be funded for these different financial institutions. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, Glenn, actually, we have another question from our Manila Times reporter, Bella Carriazo, again, asking whether during the time recently that the DNR blamed the flooding in Manila on garbage and used oil from companies in the clogging of waterways. Now, what should be done to address this? Actually, I think we can cascade the question to all our panelists and speakers, but maybe we begin with you, Glenn.
Yeah, first things first, I would always start with the assessment. I'm a scientist, all right? I cannot just provide a solution without scientific basis. So it has to be done scientifically. It has to, that's what I'm going to do first. I have to go there, I have to assess it properly. And what particular source, what are the sources? Who's the culprit? Who is the main source why this flooding is why this particular flooding happened. So you have to identify where the sources are. And then the next step will be you have to analyze them properly. And the next step will be provide solutions how these things are going to be addressed. And we will provide definitely a recommendation to the Department of Environment and Natural Resources. So basically, that's what I'm going to do.
Ludwig?
The fourth, can I ask if you can repeat the question again?
Okay. Well, our reporter was asking, Bella was asking that in terms of the DNR's report or saying that a lot of the flooding in waterways was caused by the clogging in terms of oil from companies or garbage produced by businesses. And so what are the recommendations? What do we do about this problem? Because it seems to be something that's perennial and when actually it's something we can prepare for and address even before the disasters happen.
Okay. Well, I agree with the comment of Glenn. No, there has to be an assessment on this, but let me just tie in the problem on whether Republic Act 9003 is properly implemented. Now, Republic Act 9003 is the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act. No, I think that was enacted into law almost or a little over 20 years ago. And in that particular law requires local government units, no, to implement the law, especially on the segregation part, no. And we know that there are a couple or a lot of local government units who have done their part, but also there are a lot of local government units who have not done their part. And some of these LGUs have not been flagged or called their attention for not implementing RA 9003. No? So I believe that if we embrace the provisions of the law, RA 9003, we will be able to address flooding in the area. At least one of the solutions to address flooding in the area. Because these are waste, and there are, not only corporations, but also ways of the individuals have to be managed. And early on in my presentation, we are already aware that the EPR law has lapsed into law, without the signature of the president, and this mandates large corporations, specifically on plastics, to have their own EPR program, meaning they have now the responsibility to collect their plastic packaging, the one that they have produced, for their products. So the mechanism is already there, the policy is already there. Right now, of course, we are waiting for the finalization or publication of the implementing rules and regulations. Even with the absence of IIR, I think the law becomes effective. I think this is something that large companies, and even importers and distributors have to look into, especially in the management of their plastic waste.
Okay, maybe we can move on from the urban areas and into the rural spaces that we have. I think Conrad has a question regarding that.
Yeah, we have a question here from one of our viewers, from Mr. Zalave M. Dinas, about wetlands. He says that 92% of wetlands globally have been lost. Unfortunately, the main driver of the loss of wetlands is human factors such as conversion of wetlands into other lands for residential, commercial, and industrial use. Now, of course, wetlands have already been scientifically proven to mitigate climate change. So the question is, how is SM and other industries doing or appreciate the importance of wetlands? Or have industries been taking part in rejuvenating these wetlands through their CSRs or something like that? So the question can be answered by the panelists. So who will go first? I think Mr. Mercado, you can answer this question first about.
Yeah, if I understand it correctly, I think one of the answers we have is that we are working with different properties. In fact, in Hamilo Coast, we have a program where we are protecting and rehabilitating mangroves. And this is one of our programs, and we know that mangroves are one of the most efficient systems for the environment. So we have within our program the protection of that, and we are in fact expanding this. I cannot announce it yet, but we are in the works for more of those mangroves that have been identified where we can work to make sure they are protected.
Thank you. How about Mr. Glenn? You have your views on that. Then Mr. Federigan, you can give your answer later.
Yeah, oh, thank you very much. Actually, for that particular purpose, yes, it's true. Like the mangroves, we also have different types of solutions, actually. In Climate Smart Philippines, like what I mentioned, I have been mentioning this for many times, it's science and evidence-based. So aside from that, it's also important that, this particular problem has to be addressed in a multi-stakeholder approach. We scientists can only provide you specific recommendations, but in order for this to be tackled perfectly, you need the inputs from the different stakeholders, from the local government units, from the people who are affected, the local people, the farmers, the fisher folk, the indigenous people, the youth, the women, the church leaders too, then inputs from the university and academic. So you can provide, all right, the list of this a plethora of solutions. It can be probably the adjustment of the agricultural calendar, then the climate proofing. It really depends, right? It really depends on the nature, and it really depends on the wetland that is being addressed. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay. Dr. Ludwig.
Perhaps I wanted to share with everyone my experience with Masugi Q Reserve Park. I think if you are aware of this area, somewhere in Baras, Rizal, used to be a Kalbo area, in terms of greenery. But I think after 20 years and in partnership with DNR, this Masugi Foundation was able to reforest a big tract of land in that area. But just like any other wetland in our country, they're also faced by challenges, meaning by business people who try to extract minerals from the area, and threaten the ecosystem of the entire area. We've seen perhaps lately that Masugi has been very active, in the news, in the preservation of the wetland, because if I'm not mistaken, there are around 3 companies who have been doing a lot of quarrying in the area, in spite of the pronouncement of former DNR Secretary Frank Simatu that their permits will be suspended or will be revoked. And in fact, a couple of mayors, like the mayor of Marikina and the mayor of Pasig, have also voiced their concern in the preservation of Masugi, because we know that if water would continue to flow from the mountain down to the urban areas, this is one big cause of flooding as well in the urban areas, especially perhaps on the Quezon City part. So it is very important that certain lands which are protected by law or protected by presidential announcements remain protected, because they form part of our natural ecosystem. And we know that from science, and I wish that my good friend Glenn will also agree that if we continue to destroy natural habitats, where animals live, these are sources of potential pandemics, diseases that's never been discovered yet, just like COVID-19. So it is not a threat, but it is something, a warning that we should let animals live in their own habitat. Otherwise, making ourselves closer to them, we expose ourselves to additional risk.
Well, it seems Masungit Geo Reserve and I have some similarities. Unfortunately, yung pagka-reforestation ay hindi na option sa aking pagkakalpo.
Yeah, it's true. In addition, thank you, Ludwig. Actually, there are we have lots of programs, but like what I mentioned, I will always really tell everyone that it has to be done in a scientific way, because we want to avoid what happened before. For example, you want there are organizations that planted these types of species of mangroves. Well, but you know what happened? They died simply because the species of mangroves that were planted in that area were not the right species. So, and that has to be checked. So not all species of mangroves can live in a certain habitat because they live in a different habitat. I think that has to be done again. I mean, that has to be done, and it can only do it perfectly if there is a proper consultation with the scientist. And of course, you need experts who are considered to be mangrove experts if you really want to plant species in a given area, in a given habitat. Thank you very much.
I agree, Glenn. In fact, I like to go back to an earlier question that I had when unfortunately you went offline. The question was actually, how do we further improve the linkages between, we have a lot of well-meaning local government units who may not necessarily have the know-how or the technical skills needed to properly apply their programs or plans. So they really need help from you, such as from you and from Ludwig and other organizations that are similar in terms of providing that knowledge and the specificity of the right approaches and the analysis, the research on what would be kumbaga ano yung mas angkop talaga sa problema at sitwasyon ng bawat lugar. So how can we do that? Because it seems like there's a whole lot of improvement for being able to connect organizations such as yours and Ludwig's in terms of providing advice for our national government and for local government units, and even the private sector in terms of interfacing with SM and other conglomerates.
Yeah. When I started Climate Smart Philippines more than a decade, that was my very first question. I mean, how can I make a difference in the community? You know, people will always tell you, "Oh, you have to be a senator, you have to be a congressman, you have to be someone with in a cabinet position, you have to be a secretary, or you have to be someone in order for you to make a difference." And my answer will always be no. You can always make a difference if you have the will. If it's really your passion to help the poorest of the poor, to help the government, to help the society, to help your country, to serve your country. And I started the Climate Smart. That's where I started the Climate Smart Philippines. And the Climate Smart Philippines is more than, like what I mentioned, it's more than a project. It is about training. It's about capacity development. It's about empowerment of all the stakeholders in the society. So how did I start with that? So I was thinking, how will I reach out to more people? How will I train them? So I started connecting, memorandum of understanding, started with my own network. So my friends, we know these people, we know this organization, because this is part of my advocacy. By the way, I forgot to tell you, the advocacy in the Climate Smart Philippines is for free. It's for free. We don't get paid because since it's advocacy, we provide assistance to different communities, especially the poorest of the poor, for free. And this is the training of capacity development. And every time they asked us, "Sir, we're not scientists like you," especially the farmers and the fisher folks. "Sir, we're not lawyers, we're not policymakers. How are we going to make a difference?" And my answer would always be, you don't need to be like us. You just have to have your own passion. You just have to contribute how you're going to take care of your environment, how you're going to take care of your children of children. So it's just a matter of telling them and letting them understand that they have the value to solve a specific problem. Thank you very much.
Yes, Ludwig, this was your approach in your talk earlier, right? Where you wanted to involve the everyday folk in terms of what they can do to help make a difference.
Correct, the fourth. No, that was the main message early on. That's why the presentation was really designed for them. But Young Environmental Forum is actually focused on really capacity building of our young people. No, because we find the young people have the time and the energy, no, and a lot of social consciousness in this continuing discussion. No, but on the sidetrack. Part of the advocacy that we do is how young people can be involved in policy making, no? At least in the LGU level, no? We know that we have our own Sangguniang Kabataan, no? And it is also the objective of government that our SK councils will be able to come up with more meaningful and sustainable projects, no? So part of the program that we do for SK is really how they can be involved in designing plans for their barangay and for their local government unit. Because when we look at, for example, Republic Act 9729, the law that created the Climate Change Commission, that particular law, it mandates the preparation, crafting, and submission of what we call the local climate change action plan. But if we read through the law, it is not only the local government unit from municipal to city to provincial level who should be involved in crafting the plan. No? The barangays also have the responsibility in crafting the plan. No? Just like what Glenn have said, risks of every area are not the same. No? There might be common risks, but there are certain risks that are only particular to a certain area. No? So that should form part of the barangay climate change action plan. No? Although our barangay right now, we have to admit they are very aware of, for example, the barangay disaster risk reduction and management plan. No? But I haven't seen a barangay with their own barangay climate change action plan. No? And this, I believe, young people can come in because in every barangay, there's always a young representative in the council. No? So although that's only one vote in one barangay, but at least if we push that, no, I mean, if we utilize the SK Council as the conduit to influence the barangay, that in itself, no, is a good start, no, and the inroad into policy making. No? And we know that policy making can enable programs and projects, no, for government. No?
Well, you did mention earlier that there are about you mentioned the number about 52,000 barangay in the country, and we will be having our SK and barangay elections soon, this coming December. So I think it might be a good platform for all of our hopefuls in the coming elections to get on the bandwagon of environmentalism and sustainability. I think that would be a strong pull in terms of their campaignability, don't you think?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. No, to reach out to 52,000 barangays. No, but just like Glenn, I think we also need more people who are doing capacity building. No, because if you're going to ask me and Glenn, I don't think we can finish 52,000 barangays in 1 year. I think that is kind of impossible, no? Just to go down to 52,000 barangays, no? And I mean, physically it can be done, but of course there has to be resources, no, to move people around, no. It can be done physically or perhaps through webinars like this, but sometimes you really have to be on the ground to see it for yourself. Otherwise, it's not easy to make an assessment of a particular area. No,
I think Miguel has had this experience in terms of how SM itself has helped with the information dissemination and education, plus the empowerment of communities in terms of being able to decide their fate sustainability-wise, right, Miguel?
Sorry, in fact, what I'd like to react to is what Dr. Ludwig was talking about in giving the young. Hello? Not sure I'm in. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry. I wanted to react to what Dr. Ludwig was saying in that it's giving the young the platform to make policy. I think for us, we do the communications, we listen to the engagement, we listen also to the reactions, but we also have a program internally where we are going, and we call them our sustainability champions, who are members of our company, and a lot of them are in fact young. And we're looking forward to hear more of their thoughts. But I guess, as was said earlier, it's not just about hearing them, it's giving them that platform to make policies, to make changes. And I think hearing from our panelists today, it gives us a lot more direction to move forward, not just with the energy, with a sense of purpose, and with the bright new ideas, I think, that will take us through.
Thanks, Miguel. Maybe I can ask Glenn.
I'm sorry, Dalford. In addition, yes, because you mentioned about policy making, we have this program. I mean, the program that I created, because I'm also the chairman of the board of the ASEAN Science Diplomats in the ASEAN Science Diplomacy Program. Basically, that's what we do. We train the outstanding scientists and engineers of Southeast Asia on how science is going to be communicated to the public and how science will be used, all right, for policy making. So they come to the Philippines and they provide that kind of training. So I invite columnists. They are also trained how to do the ethics of policy making, the diplomacy of policy making, because that has been the challenge of scientists and engineers, communicating science. If you ask them, definitely they will tell you the do's and the don'ts. Methodologically, they're going to tell you the science of it. But the challenge is, were they able to translate that as in a language or in a manner that local people understand that science. And that's the purpose of the ASEAN Science Diplomacy Program. It started 2016 because the main goal is we want our scientists to bring science and policy to all the levels of stakeholders in the society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Glenn. Maybe I can invite you and Ludwig, since it was mentioned by Ludwig that you can't be everywhere. You can't visit all the barangay, 52,000 places, and not just on the barangay level, but even provincial and regionally. So maybe we can invite you to reach out to our viewers to invite everyone to join you if they want to be researchers, if they want to align their platforms for those who are running for office in the coming December elections, on how to tap your capabilities. Maybe you can let people know how to reach out and get in touch and be part of the movement.
Yes, please. By the way, it's not 52,000, it's 42,000. It's 42,000, 46 barangays. All right. Yes, they can always get in touch with us. They can write, for example, if they want to express the intention to be part of or to be a partner of the Environmental and Climate Research Institute. Yes, please. We love volunteers. We love people who have this passion to create changes in the lives of our people. So please, I'm going to provide you the email address of the Environmental and Climate Research Institute, or you can send the letter to me, and we'll be very glad to entertain all of you. Thank you very much.
Ludwig?
Yes, Dalford, of course, we wanted a lot of young people to join this movement, who is working on climate change. Our mission is actually to educate our young people and our common future under climate change, and to inspire them to live a sustainable lifestyle. No? So those people out there who wanted to join the mission of the Young Environmental Forum, we are present in Facebook. Just search the word Young Environmental Forum. You'll be able to see our activities there, and you could also send us a message. No? I could also provide for our contact details, so in case you wanted to have them, you could always go to the Manila Times.
Well, Miguel, we've moved the mountain of questions like we mentioned, and it's now time to go down from the hill, so to speak. Do you have anything else to add about the corporate sustainability efforts of SM?
I think I just want to reiterate that in our sustainability efforts, just like what our speakers have said, it's really about recruiting more people to the message of, or the urgency, the fact that we can do something about it, and the fact that we have to act together for it, and we have to act together now. I'd like to thank the speakers, actually. I feel like I've been in school, and I've first happy to see that we have some parallel efforts, but more than that, I'm happy to also see the kind of passion that our gentlemen have with their advocacies, and they are in fact advocacies. And I just want to say you inspire us and you encourage us to go with this journey. And I also like to thank the Manila Times for putting this together. In fact, this is one of the strategies that we all agree with. It is all about the information dissemination. This is something we need to do. And I think the very emphasis in something we can do. And we've in fact already been doing some of it. Now is the time just to get more serious and to act together consistently for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Glenn, Ludwig, and Miguel, it's been a privilege to share screen time with you all and hearing your thoughts about making our businesses and communities better. We hope to have you again as resource persons once again on the Manila Times Online Business Forum. Conrad?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's nice to hear that companies like SM are helping lead the way to a greener Philippines. And with that, we have also experts like Mr. Glenn and Ludwig, who have been pushing this cause. So we thank all of you for joining this forum. Maraming salamat sa inyo.
Salamat. So, Conrad, once again.
Thank you, Glenn.
Sign up for a year and pay less than 71 pesos per month. Visit tmt.ph/premium to get your free 30 days of the Manila Times Premium.
What is our time on earth for? Blessed are we in lands of rich greenery, full of life and opportunity, where our responsibility is to make time. The time to lead the way for prosperity. The time to lead the way for society. The time to lead the way for Mother Earth. We make the time to do the right thing for a future that's fully inclusive and to leave no one behind. To share the prosperity for greater unity in our diversity. To elevate society by bridging the financial divide with easy access to financial facilities for all. Make time to innovate for humanity. Our solutions and initiatives are investments in a future sustainable for each and every one of us. Everything that we do and stand for is for humanity. For when we humanize how we do business, we're continuously making time for good a reality.
SM Investments is one of the largest Philippine conglomerates. We've been around for over 60 years. We have 3 core businesses, mainly retailing, banking, and properties. Over the past 60 plus years, sustainability is something which SM has had as a culture. It's something which we as a group has been practicing from the very beginning. We take into account the entire impact on the environment, including, let's say, providing sustainable energy, renewable solar powers, water treatment facilities, and waste recycling. We also provide, like for example, for our malls, we make the malls more like a community center, which also then becomes like an area for relief effort if ever there's any sort of calamity that occurs. We also provide support in terms of education and training and healthcare, because at the end of the day, it's the sustainability of the community that continues to provide the growth for our businesses. Biodiversity is very important in everything that we do as a country and as individuals. For example, in our Hamilo Coast development, we work very closely with the WWF in terms of reforestation and also culturing more mangroves in the area.
There is this climate change that's looming over our Mother Earth. If we can contribute no matter how little, and if I can get everybody to be aware of it, I think we will make an impact. It's never too late.
Sustainability is very important because for a business to be able to continue to grow and last for many, many years, it's very important that the business support the community in a sustainable way. Because in the end, it's also the community and the environment that sustains the high growth of our businesses.